Hi, everybody. Welcome to Lisbon. Oh, this meeting is being recorded. Okay. Um, so this is one room. This is the most organized piece of our apartment, this little display here. I moved it from one empty room to another for this purpose. There's some rocks that I forgot to ship with all our stuff, so I had to carry them in a suitcase. There's our new ironing board. Um, Change. This is not the way we're used to living. And I thought that was an apt topic um, to talk about today, change. Um, can you hear me okay? The echo's not too bad? Okay. Because empty apartments echo a lot, um, which is also a change. So Mark, my husband and I moved to Lisbon, I think 5 weeks ago now. Um, Very big change. It's in primarily in response to the very big change um, in America since the election. Um, People who know us know it wasn't that surprising a change. I've had my father is from Germany, and we're Jewish, so that wasn't a good combination. So, thanks to his escaping in 1939, I've had access to a European passport. And back in 1989, Mark and I decided, because he was Canadian, living in New York, but illegally at the time, and it was the height of the AIDS era. And George Bush, the father, was president, and we didn't feel safe in America. So, we got my German citizenship established and got a German passport. And every Republican election, we've kind of, this is my passport that I'm holding up in my hand here. We've looked at it and thought now. And this year we thought now. And none of that was happy change. Um, I'm sure that you all know what I mean. And But there were some good changes that came out of this too, because after the election night decision, oh, I think we're moving to Europe, 2 days later, we realized that if we were clever about where we moved in terms of cost of living and such things, that I could actually afford to retire and focus now on writing, which is what I want to be doing mostly. I'm really tired of being a doctor. And so suddenly this really kind of traumatic change also engendered this really positive change. And and it's funny, change itself isn't really the problem. Um, it's what we attach to that change. Um, how we ride along with that change seems to be the real issue. And I'm coming into actually not having prepared this talk in as great a detail as I usually do, which isn't necessarily saying much, but I thought there's just so much to talk about. Just talk about it. It's all something we're all very familiar with. And to a large extent, I would bet that for a lot of us, if not most of us, this is what brought us into Zen practice. Fear of change or a response to a change that was difficult to cope with, or a sense of anxiety about change and looking for ways to ameliorate that anxiety. In fact, I'd say that just about everything I can think of that I've studied in Buddhism, if I wanted to really reduce it down to the Buddha was trying to teach us, give us means to avoid suffering. to not suffer, not to avoid it, but to not suffer. It comes down to either teachings about the emptiness of inherent existence or change, which are actually both the same thing. So I've been sending out newsletters about the move to people, in part to escape having to answer phone calls and text messages and emails and repeat my stories over and over again. If anyone wants to be on the mailing list, feel free. Just send me your email. This week, the change I was reporting on was the discovery that while Mark and I thought we were prepared to meet the challenges of some of these changes, like, for example, learning to speak Portuguese to a reasonable degree, though we recognize this would take months to years. Mark turned to me at one point this week and said, very frustrated, I don't even know how to say yes, no, or bread in this language in a way that people will say they understand me. And we've sort of been coming up against the idea of we thought we were going to be immigrants who came here and changed in order to merge with the culture to some extent. And the first step of that obviously would be to learn the language. It's way harder than we thought it was going to be, the language, not just the merging. And that while we didn't really want to be expats per se, because we thought of that as kind of pejorative, I'm looking at Concho now thinking, he's going, uh-huh. We're always going to be expats. Our friends are probably going to be expats. Our circles will probably be expats. And then I think about my parents who came to America, my mom from England, my father went from Germany to England, where he was rescued on the Kindertransport, and then came to America. And they were expats. And it never occurred to me to think that all but two of their good friends in America were expats. And then I think about my mom who joined my father's family and community, which were German Jews, and she was British, and she grew up, I never thought about this. She grew up in England during the lead up and World War II. And now she was living with Germans. But my godmother was British and she lived in Hartford, and she and my mother were like this. And now for the first time, I really understand why the two of them were so tight, because they were the only British people each other saw on a regular basis. And so what's this about? It's sort of about clinging to what's familiar and not wanting to ride the change of becoming a new person, finding new communities. It is such a relief to go, okay, I'm going to be an expat. That's okay. And the other night we went to a gathering that turned out to be almost entirely expats. And Mark and I wound up talking to this woman who lives, I was going to say lives in our neighborhood, lived in our old neighborhood until she moved here on Lower East Side. And we could talk to her so easily. It was suddenly like we were having the easiest, most pleasant conversation. New friend alert. And the reason is because she didn't require us to change, and we didn't require her to change. To come here and find shocking anyone who's moved to a new city, and that's probably everybody in the room, let alone to a new country, the rooms, the virtual rooms, knows what it's like to have no routine left unchanged, and how much our sense of well-being and security depends on having routines, rituals, that allow us to feel like, oh, I'm myself. I'm who I expect myself to be. And I will meet people who expect me to be me as I am and think of myself. And then you come to a new city, a new country, a new continent, and Honey, where did you put the scissors? I don't know. I thought you put them in a drawer. We have a lot of drawers in this apartment. We've spent a lot of time looking for things we reasonably put in a certain location and can't find them. I don't drink coffee. I'm not a coffee drinker. Mark found two coffee spots for the morning, so he's got routines. Um, I'm working on writing my mother's book, and the book about her, and I'm getting up early. I get up earlier than he does, and I know those two spots because I've been there with him. So now I go there, but now I'm finding myself drinking coffee for the first time in 66 years because isn't that what you do in that? So even there, I'm, and then there's the larger stuff, the geopolitical stuff, and it makes me think about. Something David Wojnarowicz, some of you may have actually known him or know of him. He was a very important, prominent gay activist and artist and writer. During the AIDS era, he died of AIDS. And he had an exhibit, a retrospective at the Whitney a few years ago that was monumental. And the title for um, the exhibition was something from one of his notebooks where he said, "History keeps me awake at night." And 4 or 5 years ago, when the exhibit was up, I could retrospectively remember how that made visceral sense to me and I could recall it. And now it's like, no, history keeps me awake at night. Mark and I thought to some extent being here, it wouldn't keep us up quite so noisily, but it's still in our heads because our attachments haven't changed. And nor to some extent do we want them to, though to some extent we do. And what does that mean that history keeps you awake? What do we mean by history in that case? What we mean is things are changing really fast. Good or bad, things are changing monumentally fast, too fast to even keep up with. What it all means can keep you up at night, but I just think the rapidity of it, the confusion that comes from not being able to catch up because every time you wake up in the morning, the world has changed again. Um, that's its own thing. So I've been writing these letters, and Roshi writes back after every single one, something along the lines of "gate gate" or "life as it is," and uh, and yeah, this is all just like a really profound teaching, and it's also a proving ground for me now. It's been about 37 years of Zen practice. And I think to myself about when I have moved before, because I've moved a number of times. And this is still not easy. I complain a lot in my little emails. Um, but it seems to wash by quicker. I'm ready for the next annoying thing and let go of the last one. We had, and Mark is having this reaction too. And I think, this is to some extent how therapy and Zen both serve practical purposes in terms of psychotherapy, though in very different ways. They are not the same thing. But we have an art collection. Roshi said when I told her we were moving and that we were shipping everything we owned, she said, "Why are you shipping everything? Why not buy new stuff?" But this is our stuff. We want to have our stuff around us. I want this room to be filled with our stuff. Some new things. Um, Partly that's us just being gay men of a certain age. And these aren't things we bought to use. These are the things we have collected and curated over the course of almost 40 years. And we have an art collection. And we never paid a lot of money for art, but some of it we bought from young artists 40 years ago, and some of them turned out to be famous. So now it's actually fairly valuable. And for want of a document that we weren't told we needed. And there are many, 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 many documents you need if you move to Portugal. Um, that we are suddenly, our whole collection is subject to value added tax, which means that we will get charged anywhere from six to $23,000 on arrival. Is what it is. Gate, gate. Um, and I let go of it pretty quickly. And inside, I just prayed that Mark would find his way to let go of it in, a week or 2 weeks or 2 months or 2 years, or, maybe stop complaining about it 5 years from now. But actually within about 20 minutes, because it's just sort of like, okay, not what we expected. Cost of moving, cost of living. This moment's different than the next one, or different than the last one. Um, Sometimes it feels like a cost, sometimes it doesn't. But either way, it's just change. It's just change. This made me think of an extremely long koan that I did a Dharma talk on like 4 years ago, I think, that I went back. I just thought there's something in that Dharma talk. There was a phrase, and sometimes even Dharma talks you can't, koans, you can't possibly recall even a week later because it's just like 45 lines, and you manage to scrape your way through it with your teacher. But I thought there was something there, and I went back and I looked, and there was a line. This is the koan. Um, oh, I don't remember what it's called. Memory issues. Loop, and I've always had a hard time with this guy's name. LuoPu. LuoPu about to die. And it's Master LuoPu's last day of life. And he enters the Zendo and asks a question. And it becomes this mondo between him and a senior student, the Shuso. And they have this whole back and forth. And that alone is a hefty koan, or could have been. Then he goes back to his room, and a senior monk who was his jisha, so obviously had been Shuso many years before, but had this really intimate long-term relationship with LuoPu. He asked him a question about what went on in the Mondo and the Zendo just now, and they have a whole other thing, and that could be a koan. And then there's someone standing by, listening to them. He's anonymous. And clearly more junior in the practice. And then he asks a question and it becomes a whole other thing. So it was, I got a lot in on that Dharma talk. But the last thing is LuoPu commenting on that young monk's, his own responses. And he says, the boat of compassion is not rowed across pure waves. Rowed, R-O-W-E-D, like a boat. Over precipitous straits, it is wasted effort to set out a wooden goose. What the hell does that mean? So it turns out that if you look in the commentary, it was a method if you were rowing a boat across rapids. You would send out a floating piece of wood ahead to see where the major current would go, and then the boat would follow that. You would try to follow that current. So that's what's meant by a wooden goose. It was a floating piece of wood you would send out in advance. And but he's saying the boat of compassion is not rowed across pure waves. Compassion isn't something that requires demonstration if everything is unchanging and still. I suppose, I don't know if this is true, I have to think about this. In the realm of non-dual pure awareness, is there compassion? Probably because it can't help but erupt into duality, and then you need compassion because you've got self and subject and object, self and other, and you've got suffering, and there you are, the whole thing. But so there's always a boat of compassion, and it's always rough rowing, it's always white water. But why is it that you can't send out a goose ahead, a wooden goose? And after he says this, LuoPu dies. That's it. Biggest change. Um, he spent his entire last day. It's a really long koan, and it's full. And he's like about to die. This is the tale of his very last day on earth, and he fills it teaching, trying to guide other people in their boats. It's kind of remarkable. But why is it futile to send the wooden goose? This made me think of something else when Roshi's letter this week came in our mailboxes. And she wrote this sentence, which is pretty much what she's been replying to every email of mine for the last 5 weeks. Our Zen tradition offers many words for life as it is, and so too do poets from everywhere. Let me offer a beloved poem that seems fitting by the American author William Stafford, 1914 to 1993. And she put in his dates of birth and death, and nothing with her is ever an accident. It's called The Way It Is. There's a thread you follow. It goes among things that change, but it doesn't change. But it doesn't change. People wonder about what you're pursuing. You have to explain about the thread. But it is hard for others to see. While you hold it, you can't get lost. Tragedies happen, people get hurt or die, and you suffer and get old. Nothing you do can stop time's unfolding. You won't ever let go of the thread. So I've been struggling with, is this a different vision from the one that LuoPu is giving us? What's this thread? When I read the poem the first time, I thought, well, it's the thread of my intention. It's the thread of my expectations for my life. It's the thread of how my life proceeds from before, from some time ago to sometime in the future. Like you have any idea what that thread is going to look like in the future? Or which direction it's going to go? And I was thinking about it as something you sort of cling to, like a rope if you're climbing up a mountain, but it's a thread. It's just a thread. So I thought the thread of something that runs through you, what's that something? My mother would say, if you were worried about something not happening or something happening, one of my mother's consoling Yiddish phrases in English was, the one thing no one can take away from you is your beshert, your fate, your intended. As though there was something out there ahead that was waiting for you and that maybe this thread links you to, and just you'll get there. But I don't like that either. um, when I think about all this stuff in terms of my usual complexity theory analysis. The way the world unfolds moment to moment, we now understand through quantum physics and complexity theory and biology and blah, 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 that in every present moment, there's a range of possibilities, the adjacent possibles, one of my teacher calls them, for what the next moment can be. It's not an infinite array because everything doesn't happen. There's not an infinite randomness that conveys what's going to happen in every moment. What can happen in the next moment is contingent on the moment that has just happened and the one before that and the one before that. So there's a limited array of randomness. And to some extent, that's what karma is in Buddhism. It's not that good things happen to good people, bad things happen to bad people. It's that everything in the present, in the next moment, is contingent on the moment that came before it and what everything was in that moment. Things are dependent on conditions that precede them. That's what karma means. So in this moment, and it's never so few possibilities that it's like a clock or a machine that you can predict utterly clearly what the next moment is going to be. At this moment, we're at the edge of a cliff and we have no idea what's the next step. But even that's not a good image because there's no edge to the cliff because it hasn't happened yet. There's only where you stand right now, and then where you stand right now, and then where you stand right now. Each one arising out of this fuzzy ball of possibilities. I don't know exactly who saw it this way. In the last 2 weeks, I've heard it repeated in two different traditions, and maybe both have it. One, ancient Greek philosophy, another from a Native American culture, both saying that the funny thing about the way we view existence is that we think time works and we walk forward into our future. But how can that be? We don't know what the future is. We don't know what we're walking into. What we're actually doing, a better description of it is we have our backs to our future because that's what we can't see and can't know. And we're facing into our past, which is the only thing we do know. And there's no present moment that we're in because there's no present moment except the moment of change. It's not a location. It's not the edge of a cliff. It's not a rock in the middle of the ocean. It's not a beach on the edge of a continent. The water's 3 minutes from our home. And one of the things that I've talked about this before, I will talk about it again, that my mother said in her last few years when she had lost her short-term memory, and she had been having visits from dead people, what people call end-of-life visions, but they lasted for 6 years rather than a few hours or a few days because she stuck around. And she had been an anxious woman worrying about the next moment. History that might happen kept her awake every night. She created histories. And now she was happy all the time. And I said to her, how do you smile? You even smile when you sleep. How do you stay so happy? And she said, well, I no longer worry about the future and I can't remember the past, so all I have is the now. And when you live in the now, you're happy. And usually when I give a Dharma talk, I mention how I don't understand how she could have maybe, I guess, a couple of tiny little strokes. And I have to sit on a cushion for how many goddamn hours? But I think that's getting to the heart of change. I spend so much time, this is another thing she would say, all the things I worried about never happened. That wasn't quite true. I pointed out to her, Ma, there were a few things you worried about that did happen. We don't know what the next moment is, or the moment after that, or the moment after that. And we can't even know how we're going to react to those things. My mother once said to me, she had Parkinson's, which was not the cause of her memory loss, it was something else. Um, but we went into a doctor's office and she said, promise me you'll never let me get like that. Meaning the kind of woman she became, which was the happiest time of her life because she was living only in the now. Who was that woman to tell that woman, you don't want to change like that? So I think that's what LuoPu is getting at. We think the way to deal with change is to think about, well, throw the wooden goose ahead. Maybe you'll see what changes are coming. We don't know. We never know. And that's what our practice fundamentally keeps coming back to is, are you with your breath? Are you with your koan? Or are you leaping ahead to something that hasn't happened, that may not happen, that's your, total fantasy? Or are you hanging on to something in the past that's already gone? Come back to this moment, come back to this moment, come back to this moment. So, and experience that change moment by moment so intently, so discreetly that fear and anxiety melt away. And to me, that's the end of suffering. To me, today. Thank you.